Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Yeah. Feliz Nuevo Año. Is that correct? Not quite sure. Hopefully. So, ladies and gentlemen, Antarctica. Wow. Did we all enjoy it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Did we all see lots and lots of penguins? Yeah. Okay. I noticed while I was out and about on deck yesterday. Let's be truthful. Some of these penguins are, a little bit distant. I saw a lot of people squinting as they're thinking, is that really a penguin? You're really telling me that's a penguin? Do not worry. When you reach Falkland tomorrow, you will get exceptionally good views of all the penguins. The ones we saw yesterday were largely gentoo and chinstrap. I know some people saw a daily penguin as well, and I think one or two people saw some macaroni penguins. And tomorrow you'll get the chance to see king penguin, Magellanic penguin, and rock hopper, depending on which tour you've chosen. Just to follow on from something that Kev mentioned before, yeah, we can't put one in a suitcase and bring it home. But what I would say, these are wild animals, and it does seem to me that the bigger the lens, the closer people seem to feel they need to get. Okay? It's not necessary. Give the birds, give the animals lots and lots of space, and in fact, you'll find they will come to you. So, good luck tomorrow. Right, so, ladies and gentlemen, we are today going to talk largely about seabirds. Albatrosses. We're down here in the southern hemisphere. It is very, very good for albatrosses. Somebody's just asked me, are we likely to see any today? Well, we are actually. We actually also saw a lot yesterday. Did anybody see any albatrosses yesterday? Yeah, you did?
Yeah.
Was it a dark one? Was it a dark one or a white one? Dark one, yeah. Light mantled sooty albatross. We'll come to this in a minute. I know lots and lots and lots of you got many photographs that you've all been showing me. We'll probably go through most of these birds today over the next 45 minutes. It is going to be quite detail heavy. There's no way around it, I'm afraid, in order to identify many of the photographs that you've got. I'm excluding penguins from this presentation, not least because I do have my own penguin presentation later in the cruise, and they deserve naturally their own lecture completely. So, some of the birds we will be looking at are seagulls, ladies and gentlemen. Now, as a biologist, we absolutely hate that term. Okay, seagull. It's like saying field sheep. Okay, or field cow. Well, see, it's just gull, but I appreciate most people do call them seagulls, but to a biologist, it is just gull, and there are lots of species. We've got Jaegers and skewers, we've got terns, cormorants and shags, and we have these sea duck as well, and we have tube noses. Now these form a big part of what we'll see. Tube noses are a big group of birds. They are so called because they have a structure that sits on the top of the bill, and it looks just like a tube, and that facilitates scent and smelling of food, and we'll come to that in a minute. So some tube noses include the storm petrels, diving petrels, shearwaters, and of course our friend the albatross, ladies and gentlemen. So what I'd like you to consider is, we are where we are. Nothing in nature happens by chance. It is all by design, and many of the physiological adaptations we'll look at shortly, as well as, some of them are very nice, some of them are very pretty to look at, and we'll go through those as well. So here's the tube nose. I'll just get my pointer to So we've got a few species here. So they all have this little structure here that sits just on top of the bill there. Okay, that's the tube. That's why this group is called tube noses. Fancy term is the narrow corn. Narrow corn sits right on the top, and it is part of that tube nose structure. But what I would like you to consider, ladies and gentlemen, when we've got those big questions in life, like why is the sky blue when we've got too much time on our hands, we start thinking about these questions. And one of the other things, why does the sea smell as it does? And it's this, ladies and gentlemen, this is, you thought you were coming for a bird presentation, didn't you? Yeah, well, we're going to briefly touch on a little bit of chemistry. As biologists, we do have to look at everything, including chemistry. This is dimethyl sulfide. At the bottom there we have carbon and hydrogen on the left and the right, forming the methyl, and the S in the centre is our sulfide. Dimethyl sulfide. It is very, very, very important. It basically is what gives the sea its smell, amongst other things. We have rotting seaweed, rotting algae, of course, but this stuff is produced by, I mentioned a while ago, I've got a bit of a phytoplankton fetish, yeah, because it's very, very important. And phytoplankton, when they decay, or indeed when they are stressed, release dimethyl sulfide. Why is this important? Because when phytoplankton becomes distressed, it's generally being grazed upon by zooplankton, such as krill, for example. And as we know, pretty much everything eats zooplankton, particularly seabirds. So we look at the tube nose that we've just discussed a couple of slides back. It's really easy for us here. We know where Sabatini's is, we know where the horizon court is, we head straight there when we are hungry. These oceans are absolutely vast, and it is not easy for these birds to find their food. And when dimethyl sulfide is released into the atmosphere, the birds know that that phytoplankton is being distressed because it's being fed on by zooplankton, and it is that substance that the tube noses home into, and they head straight for it. And that's how they find their horizon core, ladies and gentlemen. It's clever, clever stuff. Now, you'll be relieved to hear it's not going to be a chemistry lecture. Okay, so let's move on to some of the birds that we've seen. This beautiful bird is, of course, a snow petrel. Anybody see this last couple of days? Yeah, gentlemen here. Don't always see them. I know the bird watchers at the top. I've seen 3 or 4 during the course of this trip. Very nice bird indeed. So nice we're going to have 2 pictures of it. And the Latin name of this bird is Pagodroma nivea. Now that's, here we go, snow petrel. Has anybody, there must be the ladies in the audience that have heard of nivea before? No one heard of nivea? Yes? Yeah, what colour's nivea? White. That is right, because nivea is actually Latin for Snow White. That's where the moisturiser gets its name from. Yeah. So, snow petrel, Pagodroma nivea. We have this, soft plumage petrel. Again, a lot of these birds are called petrels, and we'll come to the reason why shortly, but they do have very, very soft plumage. This is a blue petrel, ladies and gentlemen. Can we just see that white tip at the base, at the end of the tail? there. And that is pretty much the only thing that distinguishes this bird from many other similar looking birds. A lot of them are tiny. If you do have binoculars, that is the best thing to carry around. And the next slide, I pretty much guarantee that you will have all seen these over the last few years. Yes?
Oh, here's one.
Very, very pretty bird, yeah? This, the actual name, the English name, is Cape Petrel. Cape Petrel. However, the Spanish have a far, far nicer name for it, and it is Pintado. Pintado. And I believe that translates into painter or painted. And they quite literally look like somebody's got a paintbrush and just flicked it. Flick the paintbrush all over it, and it's got that white splattered look. Pintado. Much nicer name than Cape Petrel, but very, very common. We've seen lots of them over the last few days, and we'll continue to do so. What we do is we lose species as we go north, or we gain species as we go north also. The latitude is very, very important for these birds. This is a very nice little bird. This is a black-bellied storm petrel. It looks like it has a white belly for sure, but right under the ventral stripe there, it is in fact has a black strip. For those in the audience that are of a theological bent, the reason why petrels are so called, virtually all petrels have to run on the water in order to take off, and that's what they do. And Peter the Apostle was one of the chaps that was able to walk on water. Peter the Apostle. That's where the name Petrel and Peter comes from. Wilson's petrel. We've seen this slide before. This is the smallest living warm-blooded animal that lives in the Antarctic. Very, very small indeed, only about 10 inches long, about 14 ounces in weight. And again, I said it was a little bit heavy on detail. How we identified this particular petrel from others, can we just see there? They are its toes, believe it or not. And the fact that those toes project beyond the tail identifies this bird in part as a Wilson's storm petrel. And here we have a seagull.
No.
You have a gull, specifically a dolphin gull. When we come into Stanley tomorrow, you will see lots and lots of dolphin gulls. They're very pretty actually. They won't steal your fish. Well, actually, they might steal your fish and chips. So just be careful. They have a big, bright red beak like this. For those in North America, Canada, and indeed Northern Europe, you'll probably be familiar with birds like Bonaparte's gull, Franklin's gull, black-headed gull, and they all have black hoods in the summer, and then in the winter they lose that black hood. This bird, naturally, as it being the opposite end of the globe, does precisely the opposite. In the summer, in summer plumage, as it is here, it has a white head, and then in the winter, that head turns black. It gets a black hood in the winter. But you will see lots of these in Stanley tomorrow. There's a dolphin gull.
Ooh.
Now this is a imperial shag. We saw lots of well, we saw a few of them actually in Antarctica. They've got a few names and they vary in their size and shape. We call these subspecies. They start in Chile and move right around to the Falkland Islands. We get them down in Antarctica as well. The other name for them, as we can see, ladies and gentlemen, is the blue-eyed shag. Very nice indeed, very bright blue eye. A loving moment there for our two blue-eyed shags. And then we have sea duck. Sea duck are very different to our freshwater duck, our mallards and our teal that live on the pools in lakes, on the lakes and rivers. But these sea duck live largely, as the name implies, on the sea. And this particular species, ladies and gentlemen, is what we call a steamer duck. There are two types of steamer duck, flying steamer duck and flightless steamer duck. Now, both species of steamer duck, whether it be flightless or flying, simply don't like to fly at all, which is where they get their name from. So, if a steamer duck needs to move from point A to point B, it will row itself across the water using its wings. And it looks very, very much like a paddle steamer. That's right, it does. It looks just like a paddle steamer as it rows itself across, and that's where the name steamer duck comes from. Flightless and flying. You should see these, they're big, big ducks, and they all sit quite close to the shore. If any of you go to Bluff Cove or Gypsy Cove tomorrow, you'll almost certainly see steamer duck. I hope to see some pictures. We have these guys, these are skewers. I know in America you guys call them Jaegers. In the UK, Europe, we call them skewers. This is a brown skewer. Again, look quite similar to seagulls really. But this one is a very beautiful skewer. This is a long-tailed Jaeger. And they've got a very long tail, very yellow face, and very, very elegant. Now, a fancy term for you, ladies and gentlemen, for your dinner parties when you're back at home, kleptoparasitic. Kleptoparasitic. For those who don't know the term, it basically means it steals stuff. Okay, and they really do. They steal other birds' food. They'll sit on the water, and as the poor old puffin or the poor old tern is flying back to its family with its hard-earned catch, these guys will literally fly up off the ground, harass it to death, and make it regurgitate its day's catch. That's what these boys do. Kleptoparasitic. They actually have a very, very different diet down here in the South Atlantic. They spend their winter here, but when they're up in the Arctic tundra around Alaska, Siberia, Norway, Fenno-Scandinavia, they virtually, their sole diet, would you believe, are lemmings. Yeah, so the poor old lemming gets a bit of a hard time when the long-tailed Jaegers turn up. Very nice bird. Now, we're going to move on rapidly towards albatrosses, but before we do, and a lot of people saying, have I just seen an albatross? Is this an albatross? Well, no. Okay, this is a giant petrel. They are huge. They actually do reach the size almost of some of the smaller albatrosses, but they are in fact giant petrels. There are two species down here, southern giant and northern giant. They all... Did anybody see a big white bird when we were down in Antarctica? Yeah, okay. That's the pale form of a southern giant petrel. It is only the southern giant petrel that has that colour form. Okay. If you see any other colour form of a giant petrel, whether it be brown, black, coffee coloured, it can actually be either northern or southern giant petrel. And the only way to tell them apart is the tip of their bill, the tip of the beak. On a southern it's greenish, and on a northern it's slightly reddish. And that is the only way we can separate northern and southern giant petrels. So the bird on the left, if we can see, slightly pinkish tip to the bill, and that is a northern. And the bird on the right, slightly greenish tip to the bill, and that is a southern giant petrel. You have to get pretty close to see some of this detail. And frankly, looking at the size of some of these beaks, I'm not sure I'd like to get that close. They're a bit brutal. Now, we move on to albatrosses. There are 22 species of albatross across 4 genera. Those genera are great albatrosses, the big ones, the royals, the wanderers. We have the mollymawks. They're the smaller albatrosses, like black-browed, and we have the North Pacific albatrosses, and we have sooty albatrosses. And the sooties, we saw a light mantle sooty. There is also a sooty as well. Just as a point, ladies and gentlemen, there are no albatrosses in the North Atlantic, none whatsoever. They're virtually all in the southern hemisphere, so you're very, very well placed down here over the next couple of days. There are 3 species in the North Pacific. There's 1 around the equator, waved out albatross. Anybody been to Galapagos? Yeah, did you see the waved albatross? Yeah? Yeah. But in the main, most albatross species occur in the southern hemisphere. Oh, just to nip back to that slide. So, this boy here, as we can see, I've said this before, he's wearing eyeliner. That makes this a black-browed albatross. Very distinctive black line through the eye. So here we have, I know we've all seen this before, but albatrosses are circumpolar. We have a species here called the Chatham Island albatross, breeds on a single stack just off New Zealand here. Australia's down here. We get lots of albatrosses off South Africa, and of course we are here, and we're heading up to Falkland here, and we're seeing lots of albatrosses, but they think nothing of circumnavigating Antarctica, circumnavigating the globe. It is easy for them to do so. They open those huge wings. It's called dynamic soaring, and they expend very, very little energy in that flight. If you consider how fast a hummingbird wings beat, they, 1,000 times a minute. These guys use a lot of energy doing that. Albatrosses, on the other hand, use very, very little energy at all in circumnavigating this globe. Now, one of the reasons why albatrosses do not occur in the northern hemisphere is that a very, very long time ago there was a sea route connecting the Pacific with the Atlantic called the Central American Seaway, and that closed over and basically isolated the North Atlantic populations to the point that they died out. The southern hemisphere populations and the Pacific populations obviously continue. But the other issue is, have we all heard of the doldrums? Have we all been in them occasionally? Yeah, well, the doldrums are a band of non-air, effectively, that runs around the equator. The fancy term is the intertropical convergent zone, and that is just a band of lack of wind. It was a terrible thing for the sailors back in the day, and a terrible thing for albatrosses too, because, as I said, they need wind in order to fly. They don't like to flap if they can help it, and to get across that dead zone, they would have to expend an awful lot of energy in doing so. So it's almost like a physical barrier preventing albatrosses moving from the southern hemisphere to the northern hemisphere. We're going to look at some albatross species now. Again, there's going to be a lot of detail, and it's all about permutation and combination of colour, particularly around the beak, particularly around the head and the bill. So this first one is one of the mollymawks, one of the smaller albatrosses, grey-headed. I do believe this has been seen over the last couple of days. As we can see, it has a grey head, but it also has a black bill with a yellow stripe running down the top of it. That makes this the other thing to note is its black back. It has a completely black back. The big albatrosses, the wanderers, I know that's a bird that a lot of people are looking to see. We should certainly see it as we head up to Falkland, even as far as Buenos Aires. We still have that opportunity, but the black back of the mollymawks contrasts with the white back of the big wandering albatrosses. So here you have the grey head with the yellow stripe, compared to a white head with a yellow stripe. Okay, so this bird doesn't have a grey head, this just has a white head with a black bill and a yellow stripe. That makes this a yellow-nosed albatross. Pretty common, ladies and gentlemen. We saw lots on the way down, we'll probably see lots on the way back north. This is a yellow-nosed albatross. By way of comparison, the one that everybody wants to see, the largest bird on the planet, and it's this guy, our wandering albatross. 12-foot wingspan.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's pretty big. And again, they open their huge wings, they expend no energy whatsoever. It is called dynamic soaring. It's very similar to, if anybody is familiar with sailing, where you can tack from side to side in order to move forward. Actually, albatrosses do that, but on a vertical and horizontal plane, and that enables them to move in pretty much any direction they want to. But we note it has a black back, a white back, and again that distinguishes it from some of the other albatrosses, particularly the smaller ones. Brown wings. These wings actually get whiter and whiter as wandering albatrosses age. So we can see just how white those wings are there. Some people call these snowy albatrosses as they get a bit older. The other albatrosses are the other great albatrosses with white backs. Royal albatross. This is a northern royal. The wings are completely black. There's no white in these wings at all. That makes this a northern royal. These slides will be, if anybody wants a copy of any of these, just find me on the deck, I'll give you my email and I can send them over. Northern royal. In comparison to its pal, southern royal. And this is a southern royal because of that white front edge to the wing. And that's what identifies this as a southern royal. So a little bit more technical stuff. The upper and the lower mandibles of all royal albatrosses do not meet properly. Their cutting edge doesn't quite meet, and that leaves this black line that runs down the side of the bill on both species of royal albatross. On wandering, which is at the bottom, we can see that they meet perfectly, and that doesn't create that black line. But again, with a good photograph, you'll be able to see that, no problem. Now I know a few of you have been on since LA, is that correct? Yeah, okay. Well, we're going to go through briefly a couple of the Pacific albatrosses that you may have seen. Again, it's all about combinations and permutations of colour. We have this guy, white cap to the top of the head, greyish down the cheeks, and again a yellow and black yellow and black bill makes this that was a Buller's Albatross, I'm sorry, Buller's Albatross. And the next is Salvin's Albatross. Now immediately we can see from the beak, the bill colour, there's no black in it, there's no yellow in it really, it's kind of horn coloured, greyish, grey cream coloured, so straight away we identify this as a Salvin's Albatross. And the one that breeds on that single stack, the stack is called the Pyramid, off New Zealand, and the world's population of this guy, this is a Chatham Island Albatross, and they all breed on a very small stack off the coast of New Zealand. Now, when I was a very, very young boy, ladies and gentlemen, I think I mentioned this in the opening presentation, we in the UK used to have to call friends and the family auntie. I don't know whether that's the same across the globe, but I had an Auntie Jean, and she bought me a book, Birds of the World. And in that book, as I turned the pages as a 10-year-old boy, I came across a bird called a light-mantled sooty albatross. And in my wildest dreams, I never ever thought I'd get to see one. And 30 years later, I got to see this guy, light-mantled sooty albatross. Very, very attractive. We saw quite a few of them yesterday following the boat. And it is, in fact, my favourite seabird. No albatross breeds on Antarctica. They all breed on the sub-Antarctic islands, places like South Georgia, for example, and it is on South Georgia that you'll see some pretty big colonies. Yeah, hundreds upon hundreds of these are black-brown albatrosses, and they are colonial nesters. Even the big albatrosses, like wanderers, that won't necessarily nest in this level of density, but certainly they are colonial nesters. And this is what they produce. Yeah. There's a chick, a baby black-browed albatross. So a few facts. What do they eat? Well, they eat deep sea isopods. Squid's always a favourite. Crustacea, as usual. The poor old krill gets it again. How deep do they dive? Well, they're pretty lazy, actually. They don't like to dive. A lot of them will scavenge. They'll come across a blubber a whale carcass, and they'll sit on it. They'll shallow dive, they'll upend like a duck. Some will go fairly deep, but in the main they're pretty lazy when it comes to feeding. And how long do they live? Well, about 50 to 60 years, ladies and gentlemen. They're pretty long-lived birds. And we'll come to that in just a few slides' time, because there's quite an amazing fact. Many of you might have already heard of an albatross called Wisdom. No? One or two? And this is what they eat. Here's some of their favourite food: squid, calamari. You have these are actually quite big. I know this is what we call zooplankton, and this is one of the krill species, and they're about 6 centimetres long. And actually, they can, if they don't get eaten, if they can avoid being eaten, they can actually live a surprisingly long time, up to about 5 years, believe it or not. So, ladies and gentlemen, have we all heard of the rhyme of the ancient mariner? Water, water, everywhere, not a drop to drink. Are we familiar with that? Yeah? Well, not so in the case of albatrosses. In fact, all seabirds have the ability to drink salt water. Again, there is no fresh water at sea. We can't simply turn on a tap and start drinking fresh water. It is all about physiological adaptations. It is about evolution that allows these birds to spend their life at sea. When they breed, I showed you that picture before of a chick. When that fledges, that will spend around about 5 years at sea, just flying around. A lot of people have been asking me, do they not ever land for 5 years? That's not true. They do land, they land on the sea, but what they do not do is they do not return to land until they get to about 4 to 5 years of age in order to breed. So, coming back to this, supraorbital gland. Avian kidneys are pretty poor in their function, and they have another gland that sits just above the eye, and it takes in, when the bird swallows the water, it is like, in effect, its own desalination plant. And I described to you before the tube nose. Nothing's by accident, and what happens is the salt and the bicarbonates and the sodiums are excreted out of that tube nose. It runs down 2 little grooves either side of the nose and then ends up as a little drop at the end of the beak. Have any of us ever seen something like a seagull with a little drop of water at the, yeah? Few heads nodding. That is the excretion out of the nose. That bird's been drinking salt water, and it's excreted a very high concentrate of sodium and bicarbonates to get that salt out of the water, and the bird retains that fresh water. We all need fresh water in order to function. It is truly a remarkable physiological adaptation. And just to prove the point, here we have it. It might have caught whatever's been going around Princess Sapphire, but it looks like it's got a runny nose. That is actually the excretion coming out of that bill there. Now, I mentioned an albatross called Wisdom. We're talking about longevity. How long do they? Excuse me. How long do they live? Around about 50 to 60 years, depending upon the species. One bird, however, is this bird. It's a Laysan albatross. Now, I don't know whether you're familiar with a process called ringing. We call it ringing in the UK. I know in the States and Canada it's called banding. And Wisdom had a band put on its leg in 1956, ladies and gentlemen, and it is still returning to the island of Midway in the North Pacific, and it came back again last year. So 1956 to 2025. Now, my maths isn't fantastic, but that makes this single bird 69 years of age. It is actually outlived the person that put the band on its leg. It's extraordinary, isn't it? But there's more to this, ladies and gentlemen. I mentioned that they take 4 to 5 years to reach sexual maturity. Okay? When Wisdom was banded, it was banded sitting on an egg. So at that point, Wisdom must have already been a minimum of 5 years of age. So if we add 5 to the 69 from when it was ringed in 1956, lots of maths here, we actually get to a figure of 72. So we know Wisdom cannot be any younger than 72 years of age. It could even be over 100, we don't know, but it's extraordinary, ladies and gentlemen. And these birds, when you see them flying around the boat, I always say, nothing's by coincidence in nature, it is always by design. And some of these birds, I'm passionate about them, and hopefully you are too. I hope to see you all on the deck 7. We should see lots and lots of albatrosses on the way north. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time.